know. Hey, Jess, what's up? Yeah, a dramatic entrance.
We are live, so
Oh,
I got that all.
awesome. Hi there. My name's Nicole Thiessen, and I'm hoping that you can hear me through my mask and see my sanitized hands because all of that is happening for both of us. Welcome. This is our third studio session, and we're so excited to be in Regina at Jess Richter's studio. I suppose if you can hear me clearly, and Jess, maybe just say hello.
Hello, are you able to hear me well?
So if you can hear us, maybe let us know by sending a little comment in, and we'll just make sure that we're good to go before I talk too much. We had a lovely drive up. We came through Moose Jaw and visited a lovely pottery studio there. Any comments yet? Yeah, that was okay. Well, I'm going to assume that everybody can hear me. Okay, excellent. She can hear me. Okay, thank you, Denise. So we're good to go. Before I get started, I just want to mention a big, huge thanks to all of our supporters. We have to thank Rosthern Agencies, Affinity Credit Union. We have, I'm blanking, Josie. Oh, Funk's Funeral Home in Rosthern. And we also have the town of Rosthern. We have Sask Arts, the Department of Canadian Heritage, OSAC, and Sask Lotteries and Sask Culture. Did I get everyone? I think so. Okay, awesome. Okay, so welcome here. We're gonna just find out a little bit about Jess first. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about yourself and your background, just so that people understand where you're coming from.
Sure, okay. Am I holding the mic, or do we
Why
just have
not?
that? Okay, here, I'll just put it in my scarf like a little present. Yes, so I am originally from Nokomis, Saskatchewan, so it's a little town about an hour and a half north of here, 400 people. So I grew up there, and I always loved art, so just making sure my scarf isn't covering the mic. I always loved art, and I decided that I wanted to go to art school and be an artist, which I think my parents were a little bit like, okay. Can't see my face as well, but I'm doing a really good face, I promise. And so I ended up doing a Bachelor of Fine Arts in printmaking.
And that was at University of Regina?
Yes,
Yeah.
and then I stuck around University of Regina and did a Master of Fine Arts there as well, also in printmaking, which is weird because I don't do a lot of printmaking anymore. It's kind of interesting. When I was doing my Master of Fine Arts in printmaking, that was actually kind of when I stopped doing printmaking, but I just kind of like pushed through a little bit. So
Sometimes it takes a different path.
it does, yeah. Or like, maybe printmaking was part of what I did there, but it wasn't all of it. But it was good. It was a lot of fun. So I think I graduated from my MFA in 2017. So it's been 3 years now. And so since then, I've just been like living the artist life, applying for things, getting some, not getting most, which is kind of standard. But so, yeah, that's...
Well, I should just add to that, if I can borrow
Okay.
the mic for a second. Actually, Jess Richter's art show Scissor Cuts is going to be at the Station Arts Center in November. And so that's sort of what made this connection in the first place. And we wanted to really try and connect with as many artists as we have in our gallery as possible. And so my introduction to your work was through paper cutting, or Scherenschnitte. That's Scherenschnitt?
We're both butchering.
Oh, I'm sorry. Schnitt the Schnierens. Yes. Anyway, so it was fantastic work, but that was my introduction to you. Mm-hmm. And after talking a little bit with Jess, we were saying, you're into some totally different stuff now. Mm-hmm. So I think what a lot of our listeners might connect with is the whole immigrant experience or cultural identity that kind of comes into some of your work. And you don't have to go into a ton of detail, but maybe just to let people know with the Scherenschnitte how that came about. I'm sorry. I know everyone's just cringing. Sorry, Mom and Dad. Okay. So just maybe give us a hint of that background as well, your family background.
There we go.
Okay.
Sure. So, my family is actually comparatively new to Canada. You know, I think a lot of people will talk about how their family came here in the early 1900s, and you know, certainly my mom's side was here a bit sooner than my dad's side, but my dad's side only came here in the 1950s. So, I'm second generation Canadian on my dad's side, from Germany. Well, kind of from Germany. I think like anyone who has Eastern European heritage will be like, I mean, technically we're German, but they kind of lived like in all these different places. Yeah. So my grandparents lived in German areas of Europe during the Second World War, and then after the Second World War ended, the countries they were from didn't exist anymore. Like they'd been kind of rewritten, essentially. Like it was like where they'd lived for hundreds of years just didn't exist. And so, like many people, they chose to come to Canada after the war, which, of course, you know, going to a country you were just at war with to go live in was, I'm sure, a very difficult experience, and also, you know, healing from what you would have seen or gone through during the war. And again, I think anyone who has a grandparent that has, you know, served as a soldier or lived in Europe can really relate to that idea of, you know, sometimes it's really hard to comprehend what your grandparents went through, though when you compare them as to people you know them, you know, growing up as a kid, and then you think about kind of the horrifying things that they would have seen or they would have went through. And so a lot of my work really has to do with kind of grappling with that history of being German Canadian, and how that can be really complicated when, you know, Canada kind of came into its own during World War II. Like it was a really important former of national identity for us, according to history professors and whatnot. But it was, right? Like it kind of was when we really separated from Britain and became a country. And so a lot of my life and work is wrapped around the question of, what do you do when that is a really important former of identity, but not only are you not a part of it, you're on the wrong side of it.
Right.
And it's complicated.
It is. And sorry, just to add to that, I was reading a little bit about some of your installation work, and I thought it was interesting that, you know, maybe in your grandparents' day or in their children's day, there was this idea that if you're from Germany, there's good Germans and there's bad Germans. And there's not a lot of room for the nuance of everything that happens in between. And I feel like a lot of that, many people would relate to that idea, and just trying to feel that out amongst your peers, where there was our parents, you know, experiencing that kind of a thing as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to get right to it here. We're standing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this piece?
After that downer note. I know. Actually, so when I had my graduating exhibition, one of the comments I got in the comment book was, well, that was kind of a downer. And I was like, that is actually one of my favorite comments, so I will stand by that forever. So anyways, yeah, so my work is still really based and influenced on my German heritage. But, you know, as we were talking, a lot of the conversations I were having, like, they're pretty heavy. And you know, I was starting to feel really sad and depressed from talking about that all the time and kind of reliving that trauma, and, you know, asking myself, like, how much of it is mine to share. And so when I was working on that installation in Nokomis, where I was like in this abandoned house and like building a whole installation inside it, I started listening to this podcast called Fairfolk, and I love podcasts. I'm happy to recommend podcasts. When you're working in a studio by yourself or cleaning up mouse poop in an abandoned house, you listen to a lot of podcasts. And this podcast is all about bringing folklore and folk traditions into your everyday life. And I think that for Canadians who have European ancestry, sometimes it can be really easy to forget that we do have folk traditions. We do have these really great connections to seasons, to nature, to all these kinds of things. You know, I was reading this book about how in Japan there's a Shinto religion, and there's, like, everything has a spirit in it, and like it gives, a lot of Westerners really love it because it gives you a connection. But in Europe, we also have field spirits. We also have like animistic traditions, and so much of that has been lost, through religion, but also through immigration and coming to different countries and like all of that migration. And so I was really interested in using folklore and folk ritual to not only reconnect to both my German and British heritage, because I got to discover all of this amazing British folklore as well, because my mom's side is British. And I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever read and talked about, because it's all about reconnecting to yourself and your heritage, but in a really healthy way. Right. And so what I've been doing is, because I'm from a farming community and that's really important to me, I've been exploring a lot of rituals around farming, particularly harvest, and what people used to do in Europe to ensure a good harvest, and how that might have changed when they came to Canada. I read a book about British farming practices, which sounds really boring, but it isn't. It's really cool. And about how so many British farming practices were so regionally based. Like the kind of fences you had for your cattle would either be hedgerows or stone based on where you lived in Britain, and everything was so adapted to the land. And I think that's really interesting. And so I've been interested in exploring that and folklore and heritage through these kind of macabre, spooky looking drawings. So yeah.
This gives me... Sorry, this, like right looking at this, we have Malonka in Rosthern, which is Ukrainian New Year. And it's so much fun. But when I look at this, it reminds me of that celebration. And there's like a fertility ritual going on where they throw these grains of wheat on the table and you try not to get hit with them so that you don't have lots and lots of babies. And all of this, like even the egg and the symbolism around this, I don't know, I kind of want you to just talk a little bit about if the meaning of, obviously, these very strong symbols in there. We could talk about this piece.
Well, yeah, it's really, this is what I love. I love that everyone brings in their own rituals. So I think it's great you brought in like these ideas around New Year's. And get out of here, fly. Ooh. There. Ooh, God, I'm sorry. I think I hit you with it. So one of the things I was interested in when I brought this in is how we're mixed up with our seasons in a lot of ways now, because we don't really eat seasonally anymore, right? Like even when I was a kid, I remember eating a lot more seasonally, and now we can get food whenever we want it. And I was thinking about how seasons don't mean as much to us anymore because we have technology and transportation, all these things that just make them affect us less. Right. And so I started mixing up all of the seasons in these works. So I've got these Advent candles to kind of bring in this kind of like Christmassy bit, whereas like, pussy willows and eggs are solidly red as spring, but also a full field of wheat is very much red as like July or August. So I've been mixing up all of my seasons to kind of think about like, okay, like we're reinterpreting these in a contemporary world, and how does that happen? And I love pussy willows. My grandmother used to collect pussy willows and put them on the farm and stuff, and I love having things that are quintessentially Saskatchewan, but have like its roots in a different places where I've come from, where my family has.
I feel like we've popped up and caught these two unawares just a little bit. So I don't know if you want to. Is there a story that this piece is based on? Am I allowed to ask that?
Yeah, of course. So when I talked about field spirits a little bit earlier, about how we do have field spirits in Germany, there's field spirits called Feldgeister, and they're kind of like ambiguous in whether or not they're good and bad. And that's kind of the interesting thing about a lot of pre-Christian folklore is it's really ambiguous about whether something is good and bad. Like things being good or bad is kind of like, that's a different set of beliefs. Whereas like in a lot of traditional animistic folk belief, that's not the case, which I think is really interesting as someone who's part of the Christian tradition. And so I brought in this Feldgeister, and one of my favorite movies is The Witch, even though it scares me to death. And I really like how they bring in like this goat as kind of like this demon. And so I'm like, well, field spirits are also kind of demons in that tradition as well. So, and I also have this stupid black cat named Louise, and she's kind of built like a, like, you know, those like old wood stove. She's kind of pot-bellied and shaggy. Yeah. And I think she kind of looks like a goat. And so that's kind of my salute to my cat Louise, who's just like this shaggy, pot-bellied little thing that just runs around. And whenever I make female figures, they're always loosely based on the German female spirit goddess, Frau Holle. And so she's kind of like the German Baba Yaga, I like to think. And so she's very like, she brings in winter. She's kind of like a larger stand-in for that, because a lot of German folklore was actually lost after the Second World War. It was Grimm's fairy tales were banned in Germany after the Second World War, because they were used as Nazi propaganda, which is, don't use your folklore to promote genocide, people. But, you know, so a lot of it was lost, or there's shame around it. So I'm interested in rediscovering it and bringing it back into a place where like we can enjoy it again and try to do it without that stigma.
Yeah, with its initial intentions. Mm-hmm. I'm going to try and move over here just a little bit. Okay, let's see. I don't know if it's okay here. Okay, I'm going to just talk just a little bit about your actual materials that you're using. And so what I do know about this already is that all of these, even the one we were looking at before, are ink drawings, and they're on this really sort of rich paper. And is that embossed? Is that like, it's not gold leaf, or is it gold leaf? Okay, so there's lots of gold leaf involved, and they definitely remind me of those like religious church cards you could get, or like of the saint, or, you know, in other traditions, those ones, particularly like the Ukrainian Orthodox ones, but also I think a lot of religious iconography and that kind of stuff. So let's just talk a little bit about your materials that you're using here.
I'm just like trying not to get my hands all over this microphone. Right. So when I work, I try to work only using a couple of different colors. It's not really like, I mean, those are the colors I like, but it's also because I'm really lazy and I hate mixing paint color. I hate it with a passion. I like using color straight from the tube, and I was trying to find a way to like have a clear, crisp graphic style that's similar to printmaking, but it's just a little bit more like intuitive and loosey-goosey. And this is actually the first ink painting I did. So I've only been working like this for about, a little less than a year now. And I've like, as I meant, like I kind of just move through mediums and like kind of just, I like to evolve and keep doing things and then maybe kind of go back and dip in a little bit later. For me, it's never quite about the medium. It's always about the message. Right. But I found that I just really loved how meditative working in this ink is. And so like doing all of these repetitive rowan berries but like how clean and contrast there is, like I really love that.
It looks very satisfying. It looks like you're having, it looks like it would be relaxing, not only the size that you're working in here, but also just like you said, you're doing sort of similar shapes over and over and letting these patterns form. And I find like, knowing that you're a printmaker, I guess I knew that ahead of time, but it really looks like printmaking, and it has all of those sensibilities. And I think that's what's so appealing to me. I love the black on white and just a bit of that poppy red, I guess it would be, sort of. I think let's also just, if you, Josie, want to just make sure that you get some of these pictures in. There's more of that gold leaf and the goose. You're just working on that one right now?
I'll tell you why there's a goose, because it's a great thing. So I was listening to a podcast about Christmas divination, because so many places do Christmas divination, and in Germany it's tradition to blindfold a bunch of women and set a goose loose, and whoever catches the goose first gets married. And I was like, that is such a weird tradition. And I'm so glad it's not in Canada, because I do not want to chase a Canada goose blindfolded. That's just a recipe for disaster.
That's hilarious.
I know. And it's just like, the thing I love about folk culture is it's just so weird.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it made sense at the time, but looking back at it now, you're like, that is so delightfully strange. And 200 years from now, people will look back at the things we do and will be like, that is so strange. That is so strange.
Do you get a lot of your ideas from, from your actual people that you're talking to, or is this largely from books that you're reading, or where do you get a lot of the stories?
A lot of podcasts. And the cool thing about this, we're all going this way. Oh, okay. To the chair. Don't trip on a chair. Let's kind of move. Oh, I'm sorry. That was an awful noise.
The stories, you were getting them from podcasts?
Yeah, so I listen to a lot of podcasts. Oh, I'm sorry. I just have to itch my nose under my mask for a second.
Oh, no problem.
Ugh, these masks, I tell you. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and some of it is from books and research, but again, what I found is there's not a lot of research on German folk traditions.
Right, it sort of disappeared for
even when I was doing my research for my my MFA, I was trying to do research on German Canadians who immigrated to Canada, and I found one book after 1939.
Oh, geez.
I found, hundreds of books pre-19, but after 1939, it was like, we don't even exist. And I was like, that's so horrifying. And it's kind of been the same experience with German folklore books. But in a sense, folk rituals and folk stories and fairy tales were always meant to be experienced with someone telling them to you. Mm-hmm. And so I find having someone tell them to me through a podcast, it's really meaningful, because that was the whole purpose of it, was you were supposed to tell them orally, and they were supposed to change with the times. And, they weren't meant to be stuck in this, static thing. And, paper, of course, is great for the nitty-gritty, but I really do like listening to them a lot. Yeah.
That's really cool. We're kind of approaching the desk, the sacred desk, and I feel like I want you to tell us a little bit about what happens in this area. If I can hold the mic if you want.
You can. All of the gold leaf is on the floor right now, so...
Get a close look, or I can hand it to you too, whatever you prefer. If it's weird.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of funny, I think certainly, when I was just a wee thing starting out as an artist, I was like, artist studios are so cool all the time. And then I started having one of my own, and sometimes it's a glorified storage unit, as you can see by my storage corner over there. But in a lot of ways, it just becomes like a place you're really comfortable to work in, and can just I have a small home studio at home that I'll work in more in wintertime when it's -40 out, and it's too cold to come here. But I have my beautiful big windows, which you can't see that well.
There's this huge outdoor patio out
Yes.
there, which I'm very jealous of.
And I have my little drafting table, which was my gift to myself after I graduated. And this is my organization.
I love it.
It's not much. I actually, to dust off my gold leaf, I use a blush brush, because I find it works really well.
A great thing to have.
I know. I was like, this is actually so smart. It's like a little blush brush. But,
You've got you've got water. Is this a watercolor pen?
I use gouache.
Okay.
Gouache, is that how you say it?
Yeah,
I don't
you
know.
say gouache.
I use it. I don't know how. So I use acrylic gouache usually. So it's it has the same capabilities as gouache, so it's a little bit more opaque than watercolor.
Right.
But with the acrylic stuff, it's like acrylic paint in that once it's on, it's not going to budge. It's waterproof, and I really, really like that.
And you're mixing it with water to get the viscosity
Yeah.
that you want, right?
So all of the reds you see are usually a result of that. So I use a lot of vermilion, kind of that orangish color. Sometimes I'll switch over to scarlet. And of course, I have reference books all the time. What is that? Bad artist copy, good artist steal kind of thing.
Right,
But,
yeah.
get your inspiration, of course. It's a good idea. So actually, a lot of the time when I'm working, I'll have, my ink. This is my inkwell. It's covered in gold leaf.
I love that.
I'll be working and perched like this with my desk open and stuff, which isn't always the most helpful thing, but
It collecting anything that might
It
fall.
does, and it also holds the ink so I don't have to like lean over or like, you know, sometimes I'll put stuff on the I need to get a little table right there. It's what I need. I just realized that. Thank you.
Yeah,
This talk has just
glad we helped with that.
got this out of there, and like, you know, garage sale paint palettes and stuff, but
That's classic. And the paint palette down there, I love how messy it looks because that's what's gonna happen.
it is. It's always a little bit of a tire fire in here, and but like, you know, when you're working in here and stuff, that's just how it tends to happen. Oh, this is one of my favorite books. Your inner critic is a big jerk. You know, a lot of the time you think there's a certain point where you're like, oh, I will never doubt myself again. I am an artist, and you doubt yourself. I just had like a big cry today where I'm like, I'm not a real artist, and like, and it just happens sometimes, unfortunately. But that is the truth. Is you doubt yourself a lot, especially when, you know, it's a tough profession to be in. You know, you're always. I remember when I was doing my MFA, one of the most important things a friend told me was, like, and he's a super talented artist. He'd had an exhibition at the Mackenzie already, so like he was like a big deal. And he was like, oh yeah, I applied to 20 galleries in the States and I got into one. And I was like, oh, that makes me feel so much better.
It makes all of us, yes.
It does. And like, really, like, the rule of thumb is just apply for everything you can, because and you know, as a person who works at an art gallery, I can shed some light on it. Is most of the time it's not because your work isn't good, it's just because it just wasn't what they were looking for at that time. Like, they probably had 3 artists picked out already for that show, and your work just didn't fit in with it, and that's fine. So like, really, it's about just applying in volume and bulk to everything till you hit that place where they do need you and they do want you, because that's what's normal. It's just normal to have that happen. So and then we've gone from my like messy desk to like talking about what failure is like and how you have to bounce back from it.
This is what everybody needs right now. Are we getting close to sort of a Q&A time?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Awesome.
Oh,
here.
Well, that's good. So it looks like we're getting close to our question and answer time. So now, if you have any questions that you want to ask Jess about her work, about her inspiration, about her studio, about working and living as an artist, now is the time.
Or about my cat.
Or about her cat, Louise. Oh, Louise, I love it. Oh, that's awesome. Any questions coming in at the moment? Yeah, come on, you guys. I think now's the time. You don't get these chances very often. I was secretly also looking at your sticky notes, because it's sort of like you've dumped your purse out, and I get a quick little glimpse, like the drawer and everything. And I think it does. I really appreciate hearing how a lot of the work that you spend is applying for different shows. We have September submissions. I don't know if you're accepting submissions at your other job or if this is one that you're submitting, but it's, you know, it's a constant thing that you're doing, and it's a full time. That's a lot of the time is spent doing that, right?
A thing I hate is how much of being an artist is actually administration. Yes. You have to, your taxes are a pain in the butt to file. I am behind on my taxes. Because I was just like, you know, like the pandemic was happening and I was like, I do not have the energy for this. I will finish my taxes this month, I promise. But like, you know, I have a list of all the galleries I need to apply to, all of the deadlines aren't on there, but they're in my day planner. I have a day planner for work. I have a day planner from at home, but like, you have to be organized. And like, the biggest myth about being an artist is you're going to get discovered. Someone's going to promote you. And that's like nonsense and tomfoolery. Very rarely someone will discover you and promote you, or sometimes it will be an exhibition that makes your career, and that is awesome and fantastic if that happens. It does, and like, you know, everything does build into it, but no one's going to advocate for you. No one. I say this a lot more foully to my students usually, but no one gives a crap about your work besides you. And if you don't care enough to do that work, why should someone exhibit you? And like, it's a tough lesson to learn. I've had to learn it. My friends have had to learn it. You all have to, like, everyone has to learn it, but like, you have to advocate for your work and yourself.
I think we have a couple of questions. I'm coming over. Josie.
You just have to read them back to them.
Okay.
So it's, one is, did you have a mentor?
So the question is, did you have a mentor?
Heather Benning, are you in that audience? I did, yes. So I actually got to take part in the Carfax mentorship program, and Heather Benning mentored me. And she was and I'm sure many of you have heard of her dollhouse piece, where she like went inside an abandoned house and like ripped the front off and made it look like a big dollhouse, and kind of talked about like, you know, how many people left rural towns and the death of the family farm. Then she set it on fire.
Okay,
Yes.
I was going to say, I've seen it. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so she was my mentor when I did the house project, which was when I did an installation abandoned house. How apropos. And so Heather was really fantastic in kind of giving me the nitty gritty of how to do something like that. And like just working with other professional artists, like what I like to do is look at what other people are doing in their practices that make them successful, and just be like, oh, that person applies to all this stuff, so I'm going to do that. Or like, you know, Heather like does this, so I'm going to do that. Or like, she's really good at like, you know, so it's really good learning from other artists, because they're not your competition, they're your friends. They're there to learn from.
That's so cool.
We had one of.
The question is, who have you partnered with when submitting art show proposals?
Who have you partnered with when submitting art show proposals?
Good question. So I've partnered with a couple of people. My friend Ashley Marshall and I applied for a few things. So she talks about similar things that I do, only she talks about her Hungarian heritage. And so that was interesting. So there's a bit of extra tension in there, because like her grandparents lived in Hungary during World War II, and my grandparents were German. And that, you know, like that's, and like, but that's the nature of Canada, right? Like you're going to run into that. And so we applied for exhibitions together. Right now, my friend Ayla Dimiturko and I, she's, again, similar things, only she's working with Ukrainian themes. So we're working on some projects together. So working with other artists is nice and good. And I didn't do it for a long time because I didn't think I was good enough. And then I found out if you just ask people, they want to do things with you.
That's great. Oh, that's awesome.
Is there any other? It's nothing else. Okay. Well, I just wanted to wrap up. I could stay here all night and talk about all of your stuff. And I also just wanted to add that it's always changing. So we have to stay tuned, because one day you're working with giant metal kind of installation forests. Oh.
Do you still do paper cutting? We didn't talk about paper cutting.
We brought it up just at the beginning. Do you still do paper cutting? Here you go.
I just did a large-scale paper cut installation at Neutral Grounds Window Space. And so that actually happened right at the start of the pandemic. So, like, I remember it was Friday the 13th when everything kind of went down. Because I remember I was teaching at the university, and my students were like, do you think everything will be fine? And I was like, it'll be fine. And then I got an email that the university was closing. I was like, my judgment was off. But anyways, so everything shut down March 13th, and my exhibition opened like April 3rd. And because it was in a window, it was one of the only things open. So I do a bit of paper cutting still now, but it's just in a different scale. I found that I was kind of running out of things to say with it. And also sometimes it's good to just give yourself a break from things so you don't get like worn out. That is very true. I think I have a stash of like just like a big bucket of old blades somewhere. So
Yeah. Well, that is awesome. Good questions. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And so, yeah, I guess I was going to say stay tuned to see what Jess is coming up with next. And come to the station if you get a chance. We're going to be open starting on the 8th of October, and we have Val Weeb's show up. And then in November, we have Jess Richter's show up as well. So it'd be great to come see a lot of her work now that you know so much about the artist. So thanks again. This is so much fun. And thanks for tuning in.
Wait.
Oh, what?
Can I show a picture of my cat?
Yes, you can. We always have time for cats.
I'm sorry, I'll be really quick.
I also just became a cat owner. A little tiny baby tabby cat that is the cutest thing ever, and his name is Buddy. And Buddy is secretly my husband's pet. They love each other the most. And I've got to see how big it... And we were saying that your cat inspired this crazy... Oh my gosh, here it comes.
Glamour shot is Louise. She's just a big baby and she doesn't know anything.
I feel like we're moving into the Halloween season just in time. Oh my gosh, that's great. Okay, so thanks everyone for tuning in.